that I'm a few minutes late. This will be recorded, as you've just heard. And we will be having questions in the chat as we go through. So welcome to the event, Learn the Outcomes of CSW68 to Advocate Nationally. Next slide, please. Thank you. And those of you, we'll just introduce the three speakers that we have this evening. It'll be Berth, our SI UN representative from Geneva, Linda Witong, an SI advocacy advisor, and Ulla Madsen, SI member of Danish delegation to CSW68. Thank you. You'll find their short bios will be placed into the chat box as they talk. Thank you. We'll go on to the opening remarks by our International President for 24-25, Suyong Nanalingam. And Suyong has a video that we will be playing. Thank you.
Greetings, fellow Soroptimists and everyone attending today. I'm Suyong Nanalingam, President of Soroptimists International. I'm truly delighted to share with you some opening remarks for our webinar today, titled Learn Outcomes of CSW68 to Advocate Nationally. The purpose of our webinar today is to remind all Soroptimists that what happens at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, or CSW, each year in March is just one part of the ongoing advocacy that needs to happen all year round. This year, the Commission held its 68th session, where United Nations member states negotiated to agree on outcomes, the agreed conclusions, which our speakers will discuss today. This webinar will focus on some of these outcomes based on the topics of climate justice, universal healthcare, and education. Our speakers will outline some of the key outcomes within the agreed conclusions and consider how women and girls are disproportionately impacted and why it is so important that Soroptimists take action to ensure that change happens. We will also look at concrete actions Soroptimists can take to ensure that the outcomes are acted upon and implemented in their countries at the club level, union and region level, and as individuals. And it should not just be at our level where we should walk the talk. As such, we will discuss lobbying governments at local and national levels to get the agreed conclusions known and implemented. Our speakers will share their wisdom and experience with us to provide advice on the best ways to lobby government figures to take action. Using our collective voice as Soroptimists International, we can lobby and mobilize governments to influence the actions, policies, and decisions of governments to make widespread effective change and to improve the lives of women and girls in all their diversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Suyong. Now, the mandate of the Commission on the Status of Women is a functional commission of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. Is a global policy-making body dedicated exclusively to promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women. What are the agreed conclusions of CSW? The agreed conclusions are the primary output document of the Commission on the Status of Women, and the agreed conclusions are negotiated in an intergovernmental process between United Nations and member states. The 68th session of CSW was held in March in 2024 and has the session outcomes from negotiations of the priority theme by all member states of CSW 68 agreed conclusions. An example of that agreed conclusions is paragraph 16. The Commission reaffirms the right to food and recognises that women and girls are disproportionately affected by hunger, food insecurity, and poverty, which are exacerbated by gender inequality and discrimination. It notes with concern that it is estimated that almost twice as many women as men suffer from malnutrition, and that, in many countries, girls are twice as likely as boys to die from malnutrition and preventable childhood diseases. It recognises the critical role of women in both short and long-term responses to food insecurity, malnutrition, excessive price volatility, and food crisis in developing countries, and acknowledges women's contribution to more than 50% of the food produced globally, and that they represent 70% of agricultural workers. So within that paragraph alone, you'll see so many projects that our clubs can start to work to help women and girls. And from analysis of CSW agreed conclusions done by Pat Black, an SI advocacy advisor, SI focus in this presentation is on 3 topics being presented today: climate justice, universal health care, and education. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted in these areas due to historical and structural inequalities. And to be involved all year round with the CSW process, some advocacy entry points. It's wise to prepare for CSW at the same time as member states, which is typically 1 year in advance. By preparing early, you'll be positioning yourself to be able to input into important processes, such as the creation of the 2 reports. The UN Women Expert Group report comes out approximately October, and the Secretary General's report, usually due in January, which would be of next year. These are the 2 separate reports created by the respective officers to inform the development of the agreed conclusions by providing an evidence base for the CSW priority theme. This guides the development of the 0 draft and the way in which member states negotiate on the theme. The 0 draft is usually released approximately 1st of February. And for your regional involvement, UNESCO has a regional consultation meeting on the priority theme in February each year. This feeds into the CSW documentation. Once the agreed conclusions are negotiated and agreed by all member states, at CSW in New York in March each year, it's so important now to advocate your own government to see how and when they will be implementing that document that they have agreed to on the international stage. You may want to work on one topic at a time, such as education or climate change. This is a very good way to start working and knowing that we can help women and girls from the decisions that our governments have made. Next. Thank you. And the 2 themes for CSW68, they work on the priority theme that I discussed, which this year is accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. They also have a review theme: social protection systems, access to public services, and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, which was the agreed conclusions of the 63rd session. So that was this year, to give you an idea of what the papers and what discussions we're having tonight. Next, please. So we introduce Ulla now to talk on climate change from CSW68. Thank you, Ulla.
Thank you very much, Lee. And hello, everyone. The topic today for me is climate justice. Let's look at the United Nations definition. Climate justice advocates for equitable solutions that prioritize the needs of those who are most affected by climate change, strive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure that the burdens and benefits of climate action are distributed fairly, taking into account historical and systemic inequalities. Thank you. Next slide. On the topic, I have highlighted the following key outcomes and suggestions from the agreed conclusion. As we all know, water is essential to life for human beings, animals, the planet, and what is growing on it. According to the UN World Water Development Report 2023, 2 billion people, it's 26% of the population, lack safe drinking water, while 3.6 billion, it's 49%, lack access to safely managed sanitation. It means, among others, that 1 out of 4 has no access to clean drinking water. That is really scary, I think. Climate change, environmental degradation, and disasters disproportionately affect women and girls, and among others, with women walking long distances or waiting hours in queues to obtain water, which restricts their time for other activities, such as education and leisure, and for women learning a livelihood. One of the UN goals is to ensure that all people have access to clean water in 2030. We Soroptimists have been and are still helping a lot with projects to get access to water resources where needed, projects for cleaning water and establishing safe sanitation. We cannot do it alone. One important action, we must push rich countries like my own Denmark and institutions to invest and finance in these areas to change the situation for women and girls suffering now and in the long run to secure the next generations and us all. Another outcome is to urgently address the challenges posed by the impacts of climate change, biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, disasters caused by natural or man-made hazards, and sea level rise, among others, which are disproportionately, again, affect women and girls, particularly those living in poverty, owing to gender inequality and to the dependence of many women on natural resources for their livelihoods. The recommendation is to strengthen the full, equal, and meaningful participation, representation, and leadership of women at all levels of decision-making in climate and environmental action, and implement national policies and plans related to the United Nations Environmental Conventions. Well, how can we push for more women at the decision table? One action is that we as Soroptimists can help to make it happen by strongly supporting and voting for the good women who want to run as politicians at local, national, and international levels. Women are half of the world's population. We really are. We must have more empowerment and influence on our own lives and for the benefit of current and, again, future generations. The last key outcome I want to highlight today is respect, protection, and fulfillment of the rights of all Indigenous women and girls by addressing the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and barriers they face, including eliminating and preventing all forms of violence and poverty, food insecurity, water scarcity, degradation of natural habitats and land degradation, forced displacement, limited access to information and communications technologies, infrastructure, financial services, decent work, and promoting their full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership in the economy. And of course, in decision-making processes at all levels, recognizing that culture, social, economic, and political contributions to climate change, mitigation, and adaptation, promotion of their languages, as well as transmission of their traditional scientific and technical knowledge. I'm very satisfied that this has come out of the agreed conclusion. Being close to indigenous women and girls in Greenland, which since 1979 has had self-government and is a part of the Commonwealth of Denmark, I know how important it is to respect their culture and way of living. Denmark is trying to make up for the terrible, horrible mistakes made back in time. Denmark apologizes like other countries do towards their indigenous people, which is far from enough. One example of the terrible case was during a campaign for birth control. Spirals were set up on around 4,500 Greenlandic women and girls as young as 13, many without consent. Without a doubt, a violation of women's rights, human rights. One good thing has happened recently. The representatives from Greenland can now speak in their own language in the Danish parliament before speaking the same in the Danish language. So, action. As Soroptimists, we can help heal the process and support indigenous women and girls with projects according to their wishes. The Commission on Status of Women agreed conclusion are just words in a document until it's converted into legislation or the implementation of programs has taken place. So it is up to us as an NGO to push our government to implement what they have signed for and to follow up during the next year, also back in time, until the next CSW happens, and then it starts all over again. You can call CSW an ongoing process. I am privileged to live in a country where so far the current government and parliament at any given time are positive towards NGOs and civil society and want to cooperate and at the same time greatly appreciate the work done. They know how important we are to making the community work. The Danish mission in New York was the one that started the hashtag Unmute Civil Society campaign, which I'm really satisfied about. I have been a member of the Danish delegation since 2017, and this year there were over 70 delegates from the Minister of Gender, parliamentarians, members of NGOs and civil society participating at the CSW68 in New York, plus the ones that couldn't attend in person, attended virtually from home. It is an important network for me in my Soroptimist work in Denmark and internationally. Every time we meet, we follow up on important developments within our organizations. The work with the zero draft starts when the Danish government is asking for input to the draft. I have excellent and valued cooperation with the two SI advisors, Linda Vitton and Pat Black, with the input to the zero draft and the following reversed editions. And Berthe de Vos and Marlene de Benchen are also members of that group. The work and input we bring to the Danish government are highly valued, and SI work is very well known and respected. So if you want to be a part of your country's delegation to the CSW, of course you can inform about us. You know, we are over 100 years old. We have 66,000 members in 120 countries. We have the general consultative status, only I think it's 150 that have that. And we advocate for human rights and gender equality through education and empowerment. And we have this global voice for women through SI representatives in the 7 UN centers around the world. What a difference we have been and will be in the future for millions of lives of women and girls, and then for their families, the community, and country, and how important SI can be as a partner, one you can count on, and who has a finger on what happens with women and girls, not only in the country they live in, but all over the world. A good idea is to send your union report if you are part of a union, or a single club if you make such a one, the federation you belong to, and SI annual report to the government. I can tell you that they will be so impressed and invite you to a meeting, hopefully, as a delegate to the next CSW. So partnerships are crucial to provide a bigger impact. My last point is a newly important judgment on climate justice was made by the European Court of Human Rights, Strasbourg, France, April 2024. A group of elder Swiss women won the first ever climate case victory in the European Court of Human Rights, a case they launched 9 years ago, calling the better protection of women's health in relationship to climate change. The women with an average age of 74 said that their age and the gender made them particularly vulnerable to the effects of heat waves linked to climate change. The court recognized the fundamental right to a healthy climate and to have Switzerland to do it failed to do until now, taking ambitious measures to protect people's health and protect the future of all. I hope this case, which is the first judgment ever in favor of climate justice, will be an inspiration for all of us that we never should give up. Let me finish with a quote by Mary Robinson, who I really admire. She is saying, if we took away barriers to women's leadership, we would solve the climate change problem a lot faster. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ulla. We now have, if you'd like to scan the QR code, that QR code will take you directly to our SI position paper on climate change. And our SI position papers are our global voice, and you'll see things there such as where things stand, where things need to go, fundamental action and additional action, and where Soroptimist International stands, as well as resources which are very, very convenient and valuable to clubs and members, federations, to actually make change with climate change, climate justice, and climate crisis. Now I'd like to call on Linda Witong on education, please, Linda.
Good morning from California. I put up the quotes because I think they're both fairly applicable, especially if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. At any rate, before I go into the main slideshow, I want to give you a picture of what we were going into. We had endured as a world a parade of crises for several years. Before COVID, there was a progress on education prior to COVID entrance, which should have been celebrated, except that there was already criticism about the heavy focus on data regarding attendance, rather than deciding whether or not we were meeting educational quality and learning outcomes. By 2023, the tsunami called COVID and conflicts were like repeated waves coming and decimating much of educational infrastructure and resulting in approximately 129 million girls and young women that were still out of school, especially girls living in poverty, especially those from poor, rural, or remote areas or marginalized groups, we're still among the most excluded, even after we had been trying to get them completely included in obtaining quality education since 1995. Or as I said to some of the states, well, I guess there's no sense rushing into this. The consequences of such exclusion further limited their economic opportunities, and they deepened their poverty. Since 2011, the UN was also showing alarm over the fact that even girls and women, as well as men and boys who attended school, often left without obtaining a quality education. Now, you add to that at the time that we were going in to the negotiations, 48 states had 3.3 billion people that were directly affected by underinvestment in education. So this was the, shall we say, landscape that we went in to do our negotiations. And for your information, the SI research team, which I'm part of, we start our research on the issues the day after CSW ends. And it's not difficult to accumulate actually several thousand pages of language and concepts so that we can track what has been said, what progress has been made, and what progress needs to be done. So going in there, we were also armed with citations, which we were cheerfully able to and were prepared to give to states if they had any questions. Next slide, please. The first focus that we had when we went in that we were successful on was that all women and girls must have equal quality education. So we were still concerned about addressing gender norms and biases that were still allowing women and girls not to have a quality education. We were also concerned about insufficient budget allocations regarding everyone having quality education, intersecting with the budget. In other words, even if you were allowed to go to school, perhaps the budget in your region or your country were biased against women or women of certain vulnerabilities or, for example, geographical regions, which I'll get to that in a second. Also, if you belong to a marginalized group, we were fighting for you because we believe that poverty, rural location, remote location, indigenous location, humanitarian and fragile contexts, which would include conflicts, national, ethnic, religious, linguistic minorities of women and girls with disabilities, older women, LGBTQT, any of your groups were and they in danger of being marginalized, were in danger of being excluded from obtaining good quality education. Next slide, please. So good quality education, though, we learned, of course, it had to be available on a lifelong basis, especially when we have the digital revolution. There are many people that were coming out of schools that were educated, but they did not necessarily have the skills or the updated training to deal with the digital world. And maybe they were a homemaker that were taking care of their children. Maybe they were older, but they wanted to return to get employment. All of these people needed a lifelong basis where they could obtain quality education and training and skills to keep up with the demands of the digital revolution, which, as I believe we're seeing, is not that easy. The other issue was there was a shortage of schools. And by shortage of schools, you go, well, wait a minute, there's a building down the street. Yeah, well, okay, but is it safe to go to? Going back and forth? I mean, are there transportation, or is it safe for a girl or a woman to walk to? Is it safe to be in? We have a right to a healthy environment, and that includes school. Is it safe to be in as far as violence, not only towards the students, female students, but the teachers too, as well? And we also needed to have availability of teachers. Now, female teachers are fundamental to ensuring every aspect of quality education. At present, there is a shortage of female teachers. The higher one goes in the educational system, the higher the shortage of teachers, including in STEM. So we needed to address that issue and let the states be aware of the need to increase not only female teachers, but also to be trained. They needed to be trained continually with digital and climate training, with education, quality education, with the tools and technology to provide these to the students. They also needed to be not subject to occupational segregation, because within the world of teaching, even though there's a lot of women and that are teachers, they may or may not be teachers in the areas that are emerging technology or STEM. And the research had found that if you had female teachers in those areas, female students were more likely to enroll, and they were also more likely to do better. The obstacles also to attract women teachers and to attract female students was, how do you provide quality and cultural diverse education during and after conflicts, famine, natural disasters, humanitarian events, displacement, migration, pandemics, or who are disabled or live in remote or rural areas? And another thing that people have been touching on for a number of years, which is still an issue for teachers to be able to offer quality education, is multilingual language. A lot of teachers do not go and have the language of a student, for example, that's immigrated to their country. So you need to address that and help teachers in order to give them the tools to promote quality education. Next slide, please. The raising awareness was also important because we believe the community, the region, and the states needed to know how important education was, especially in the digital age, where people before might have been able to get by with rudimentary education. In the digital age, with the internet, with computers, that's just not going to happen. We were also talking about funding. Now, there's a famous movie that says, "Show me the money." And indeed, unfortunately, much of education remains sadly, woefully underfunded. And one of the net results when we're talking about teacher shortage was that many female teachers are being paid below the poverty line. And so if their schools that they're in don't have the money to give the kids the tools and books and other objects to help them get a quality education, many teachers can't afford to do that either because they're living below the poverty line. The other group of female teachers that are being affected by lack of funding are those that are in conflicts or in humanitarian situations where some of them may be working on a volunteer basis, or they're getting paid but not anywhere near what they should be paid, much less being able to get the tools that they need to offer that. We advocated for funding. Check. We got it. We advocated for improved access to electronic devices and connections, and that included electricity, being able to have quality infrastructure that actually supplied you with a reliable, sustainable internet, and to have electronic devices that you could use so that you could be in touch with the rest of the world. In some cases, that meant talking to families and communities and saying, you allow your daughter to have these type of devices. It's not only for your boys, it's not only for your men. And oh, by the way, if you have a little meeting place in the community where you have all these access to, you need to have women and girls be permitted to be there without being harassed, without being in fear that if they're there, they're going to be in trouble or their family will be in trouble. You need to support grassroots education and training for digital literacy and financial literacy, because if your community and your family and you don't have that, again, you're going to be controlled by artificial intelligence and technology, not control it yourself, because digital and finance are right in the center of the digital revolution right now. With respect to raising awareness about member states, we also wanted them to realize that the barriers in employment such as lack of access to progressive training or harassment once you're in employment, was an issue where we were finding, for example, that in some instances, people were being educated. Maybe they were even being educated in STEM. The question was it updated and relevant? Also, the question was, how easy was it for children or girls to get into a class in their particular schools that taught it? And what we were finding was there was still occupational segregation in some of the schools where they would divert them to homemaking or cooking or teaching, just being a general teacher. They did not direct them to the place where you could make money or where you could really flourish economically and also in just everything you could provide to your family. Which would be emerging technologies or obviously STEM. Oddly enough, that was still a segregation issue in many schools, and the higher you went in the universities, the more likely it was to happen. And then unfortunately, when girls became women and they were out in the employment workforce, they were meeting with bias, discrimination, and harassment in those particular workforces as well, all of which are things that Soroptimists try to address and deal with and educate, more importantly than anything, educate. We encourage the governments to provide through life women and girls with equal access and support to learning opportunities in STEM, as well as emerging technologies. We either called it pioneer technology or emerging technologies because we wanted to leave that clause open if we needed it. Next slide. Briefly, education number 3, or focus number 3, was education must be available on a lifelong basis. As I said before, in the age of digital technology, we have to focus on providing a lifelong education which is relevant and deals with emerging subjects and careers, all of which will enable women and girls to get necessary education and training needed to be employed in not just work, but decent work. And for them to be able to be among those who control technology and their choices of decent work, rather than being controlled by technology and the choice of what employment, if any, is available to them. And that was in the back of our mind too when we were doing our advocating. We were painfully aware that artificial intelligence and technology could take many of the jobs that women who were not educated or not sufficiently educated might in the end lose access to. So we wanted to have lifelong learning for them as well, so that if all of a sudden their job is gone, they have training or can easily acquire training that will help them. We needed to have funding to diverse their educational and occupational choices for their lifelong education. Okay, so it wasn't just funding to go to school, but it was funding for lifelong education. And that could also include funding where you go to mobile units, where you go to other areas to get your training. We wanted to have that for in our proviso. The training and employment of appropriately qualified teachers, we wanted to have them have lifelong training in digital technology and emerging technology as well. The advocate for member states to, I have already addressed this, progressive training, I've already addressed. In short, we went in and we were really successful in getting our asks in. And I think to a large part, it was because Soroptimist was very well organized, had citations, had research in case the states wanted it. In some cases they did. If they had a question, we would provide them with the language or the citations. And because I think they understood, I hope for the first time, that they cannot overlook 50% of the population in the world when they're dealing with the horrendous challenges, as Ula's mentioned, with the climate crisis, as Bertha will be talking about, with the health crisis, and a wave of other crises, disasters that we have either endured or are facing. And with that, I'll end my presentation. I would say we have just a second. I would say that we do have a number of recommendations for you to advocate in your regions. I think, in my opinion, the number one issue is education. You need to educate your areas about why quality education is so very important, why children should not be leaving school without obtaining quality education, no matter what their background is, no matter what their challenges are. You need to educate them about the digital revolution and how very, very important it is for everyone to be educated in that, so they can not only be gainfully employed, but they can protect themselves when they're dealing with technology and artificial intelligence. You need to advocate for lifelong education, because people, especially in uncertain times with the digital revolution, will be perhaps in danger of losing their jobs, and they need to be able to either be continually trained or have access to training that can again reinstate them in formal and profitable work and decent work. Lastly, we need money. We need funding. Everybody is going to say that, but the educational system is woefully underfunded. When it was its most successful before COVID hit, it actually had success in reinstating girls and women in the lower echelons of education. Getting to graduate school or universities could still be a challenge, but other than some very marginal, vulnerable areas like rural or remote regions, we were doing a fairly good job of accomplishing that. But COVID-19, and I call it like a tsunami, because when it hit, when the waves pulled back the first time, there's been more than one wave, it exposed all the issues that we had with women and girls not getting a good quality education. And many of them are still with us. So we need to argue to the country why funding is so very important here. You're either going to be educating 50% of your population to help you meet all the challenges that we're now facing, or there is no hope for our people or our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Very informative. So you also have the QR code here to scan. These are also on the website with other position statements, but we have the slides there with the QR code for the relevant SI position papers for you. Thank you. Now I'd like to call on Bertha DeVos on universal health. Thank you, Bertha.
Thanks, Lee. Yes, ladies, after all these important issues mentioned by Linda and Ulla, bear a little longer with me, as health is also one of the key elements of Soroptimists International and interdependent from poverty. So allow me to give you an overview to understand why it is important to advocate for the implementations of health rights for all women and girls. What is health? Health is a state of a complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of a disease or infirmity. The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. The right to health is an exclusive right, and it includes safe drinking water and adequate sanitation, safe food, adequate nutrition and housing, healthy working and environmental conditions, health-related education and information, and gender equality. The right to the highest, thank you. The right to the highest attainable standards of health is a human right recognized in international human rights laws since many years. Since 1948 in the Human Rights Declaration, as well as the Convention of the World Health Organization, health has been mentioned. In 65, in the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. In 66, in the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. In 79, in the CEDAW Convention. In 89, in the Convention on the Right of the Child. In 90, in the International Convention on the Protection of the Right of All Migrant Workers. In 2006, on the Convention on the Right of the Persons with Disabilities. And furthermore, we find sexual and reproductive health rights in the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development and in the Beijing Platform for Action. They highlighted already that time the right of men and women to be informed and to have access to safe, effective, affordable, and acceptable methods of family planning of their choice, and the right of access to appropriate healthcare services that will enable women to go safely to pregnancy and childbirth and provide couples with the best chance of having a healthy infant. And now, in 2024, we're still speaking about the same thing, although all governments have signed and ratified these conventions. Next slide, please. Health rights and rights in poverty are clearly interconnected. For people living in poverty, their health may be the only asset on which they can draw for the exercise of another economic and social rights, such as the right to work or the right to education. Physical health and mental health enabled adults to work and children to learn, whereas ill health is a liability to the individuals themselves and to those who must care for them. Women are affected by many of the same health conditions as men, but women experience them differently. So women face particularly health issues and particularly forms of discrimination, barriers, marginalization, in addition to the gender discrimination. Hence the importance of the CSW. And here are some of the highlights achieved this year on health issues. To summarize, all women and girls need to have access to basic quality healthcare, hygiene, sanitation, and safe water to decrease the risk of exposure to diseases. Critical health services and education must be made available to all women and girls. This is essential to protecting their health and well-being by reducing stigma and violence, increasing decision-making autonomy, and providing quality information on diseases such as cervical cancer. Healthy aging must be promoted across the life course for all women and girls. Governance needs to adapt inclusive, universal healthcare via increased investment in quality healthcare provisions, staffing, training, and community education programs. A universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights must be made possible. And a human right-based approach is needed in all policies, legislation, discussions, and decisions related to all aspects of health for women and girls. That were the demands. And what happened now, I can go into more details, where we find the reaffirmation in the agreed conclusions in the following paragraphs. Paragraph 29 sets out that the basis platform to the right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and healthcare, and points out the current global position. Paragraph 36 draws specific attention to women and girls with disabilities. In paragraph 37, we find a sentence for the indigenous woman and girl. And in paragraph 40, a similar version applying to the older women. In paragraph 44, the impact of the lack of financial resources is indicated. And in paragraph 54, we talk about the concrete measurements to realize the right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of physical and mental health for all women and girls, including meaning financial support by reducing out-of-pocket spending. In paragraph E, the health issues are linked with the elimination of poverty. In paragraph CC, we find that healthcare in relation to the consequences of violence against women. And paragraphs JJ, KK, and LL deal with what is needed for healthcare, included sexual and reproductive health and rights. And even in paragraph UU, we find that the health issues linked to Indigenous women are mentioned. So in conclusion, although we didn't obtain all our demands in health, which we have been lobbying for, we surely can advocate for these important points. Next slide, please. Before I go to action, allow me to remind you all that the agreed conclusions of the CSW are not legally binding. And although the international conventions and treaty are legally binding, the international human rights law doesn't give an exact plan for the domestic mechanism. So this is our task to act. Let's now think about action to bring these agreed health issues back to the local and national levels. So dear Soroptimists, gather, request, receive and exchange the right to health information from all relevant sources. Think about local health departments, health institutions, health agencies, and organizations. Maintain a dialogue and discuss possible cooperation with all relevant actors, including the local and national governments, UN bodies, as well as specialized agencies. And please don't forget to get in touch with local and international NGOs. Please report on the status throughout the world of the right to health, including laws, policies, good practices, but also know about the obstacles. Make recommendations on appropriate measures that promote and protect the right to health for all women and girls. Advocate for policies which ensure all women and girls to have access to affordable healthcare across the life cycle. Promote education programs to ensure all women and girls are able to make choices about their healthcare, including in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Advocate for gender-related financing for all health programs which should be enable all women and girls to lead a healthier life. Advocate for gender-related financing to all the health programs and be involved in the next draft for the CSW at local and national level. Start working now. Create partnership with other NGOs and bring the points of Soroptimists International to the platform. And let me close with a quote. Now it is time to act collectively with urgency to realize gender equality, women's empowerment, and the human right of women and girls for today's generations and for the next. Another generation of women can't wait for equality. Please check out the Where We Stand position on the website and read about the health issue. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Bertha. Once again, you'll see the QR code here for the Universal Health position statements by SI. And I'll just mention again, this is our global voice. There is so much information on them that is so relevant from resources, where we stand, what we can do, what the situation is. Thank you. Do we have any questions? questions and answers? Hannah and Margaret, have any come through the chat box?
There aren't any in the chat, Lee.
Thank you. If you raise your hand, you can see the reaction button down the bottom to be able to raise your hand. You'll come to the fore. I'll give my closing remarks and then we'll come back to questions and answers. You might have a few that you might like to. As you've heard this evening, it's so important for us to connect our local and national levels to decisions and signatures that our governments make at that international level. Do you know your own government department in your nation that you can connect with that will be implementing CSW actions? I know in my country, and they're different in every one of our countries, so you will need to know your own mechanisms for women in your nation. But in my country, it would be, we have an office for women at state and federal level. We have our foreign affairs would be someone that would go through that department. It will come through there, or our attorney general. There are a number of departments that I could go through to see who is going to be implemented and what they would. The other departments probably wouldn't even know what CSW agreed conclusions were. So basically you need to start finding and maybe go to your local representative at this stage to start finding out a pathway or a map that you can start getting together to find out how and where and who implements the CSW agreed conclusions. The importance of national and local advocacy. If your government has agreed to the outcome of CSW meeting, we as NGOs or non-government organisations or civil society organisations are the watchdogs. You've heard that several times tonight. To keep them honest, they then need to implement the outcomes to benefit women and girls in our countries. But we are the ones that will be responsible for that. You heard from Bertha that basically there's no legal binding for them to implement at national level. So we have to make sure that that happens. A great advocacy project. The importance of advocating the 2030 agenda nationally, the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals. These are all connected with CSW. The SDGs are way behind in target and will not meet their goals by 2030. We need your call to action. And the Sustainable Development Goals aim to transform our world. They are a call to action to end poverty and inequality, protect the planet and ensure that all people enjoy health, justice and prosperity. It is critical that no one is left behind. When does your United Nations region, the region that you're in, that your nation is in, when do they hold their meetings to start building and feeding into CSW69, which will be in March next year? I know that UNESCAP, which is the United Nations Economic Social Commission here in Asia Pacific, their meeting will be in February for NGOs that we can, a number of us can go to or participate within and have input. So you will need to start doing research to know when what region you're in with the United Nations and exactly when they start meeting. So you can be working locally and nationally with your government representatives to start working to find out how you can have that input, and then also start working with the United Nations region to feed into CSW next year. Your advocacy will be very, very effective if we start working now for next year. And do you know how to register for these meetings? If not, once again, it's research. How can you be involved? How can you start to get the ball rolling to be involved so that you can start making that more effective difference by advocating? It's so, so important to connect that international conventions and decisions to our own local and national levels and make sure the implementation is there if your government has ratified that convention or document, or in this case, the agreed conclusions. I'll just go over Ula's, and I know Ula's got her hand up, but I'll just finish this, Ula, and I'll come back to you if that's quite okay. Some of the points that Ula suggested, and once again, this webinar is to help you connect what we talk about at CSW back into our own backyards and something that we can have an effect on. Ula spoke about the clean water, which is a human right, and the effects of that. The implementation of UN conventions, the impact and how it all impacts on women and girls. You've heard that all throughout the session. The support of women in leadership and political life. The implementation of languages for Indigenous women and girls, and the respect of their culture. CSW agreed conclusions, words, they're only words on paper until they implemented it. It's up to us. Once again, that same message keeps coming through. Cooperate with your government on CSW. And that's the same thing that I've been saying as well. How important SI is to partner with our local decision makers, partner with other groups like Zonta, Rotary, whoever it may be, other female stakeholders that can help you get some type of impact in this advocacy. Soroptimists interacting with the government to create change. That message is being created throughout the webinar, and never give up. And that's something that I think is really, really special. Never give up, because we have to break this ceiling for us to 50% of the population of the globe. Linda's education suggested actions. She mentioned how the SI team starts for next year's CSW the day after the CSW ends in this current year. But how strong is that one child, one teacher, one pen can change the world comment? That quote, I think that is really, really powerful. Equal access and availability to quality education. Continual training and skills in the area of critical thinking to counteract nature of education and training. Education on a lifelong basis. Local advocacy. Raise awareness. Importance of lifelong education. Women and girls include technology. We heard on AI, which is so, so important. Advocate for funding for gender responsive, quality, equitable and inclusive education. Advocate improved access to electronic devices and connections for women and girls, especially in healthcare. Support grassroots education and training programs, especially for digital literacy and finance literacy. Appropriately qualified teachers for quality inclusive education, and encourage STEM subjects for girls. As Linda was speaking about education, a week ago, I was in a presentation where a university educator was showing a photo. She has 2 daughters, and they were doing so well in maths. They had a male maths teacher. She tried to present this image with maths on the blackboard, a male teacher giving maths, and AI would not allow her to show girls in that classroom. She, as an educator that's working with AI, she could only finish up with boys in the classroom with a maths teacher, a male maths teacher, and maths on the board. As soon as she got girls, the maths was taken off the blackboard at the back. She couldn't get it all. That means that AI, girls, the effect of not having girls in the design and implementation of the programs of AI is already starting to have an effect. And I think that's such a major, major issue for us. Bertha suggested action for universal health. research and gather right to health information, dialogue and cooperation with all health stakeholders, report on the status of right to health, promote and protect the right to health, educate healthcare, including sexual and reproductive health, gender-related financing for all healthcare programs, and be involved in the next draft CSW at national level. So it'd be so wonderful to see everyone next year that started already having input into their government's input into documents for next year. I want to thank all of the presenters, Ula, Linda, and Bertha. Very, very informative information and background work from Pat Black and also SI headquarters. Thank you very, very much. Now I'll take any questions. Ula, did you want to?
Thank you, Lee. I just want to say that it can be a lot to take in. So I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of Linda and Bertha and myself, saying that if you want to know more or a specific area, whatever, you're always welcome to contact us. That was the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
And I did have the CSW68 agreed conclusions link, and it's disappeared from my screen. So I'm sorry, I was going to put that in the chat box, but I don't have it. But Google the CSW68 agreed conclusions from the UN Women website. There's a lot of people that have them, but make sure you get the original one from the UN Women. And that document is worthwhile going through to see what has been decided upon for women and girls. Thank you, Ula. Any other questions? Any comments? Well, I'd like to thank everyone very much for coming and being part of the webinar. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. We could probably, so now we can have the faces if anyone wants to openly talk or